bitch that makes the same fucking allegations again!
We were taking their money, all of it. And they come and say, well, what kind of, all of it. We're milking them dry.
Oh my God.
Are we just all going insane together? Today we uncover how modern society is engineered for madness and what we can do about it. During the late 1600s in Salem village, a mass hysteria began where a series of prosecutions were launched against people accused of witchcraft.
Let's come to our senses, everyone. This witch hunt is turning into a circus.
She's the witch.
Yeah,
She's the witch.
I was just about to accuse her.
A frantic witch hunt ensued, leading to over 200 accusations, with the execution of 20 people, most of them women. So how did this happen? Well, there are four main mechanisms of mass hysteria. 1. Fear and uncertainty. The fear of the unknown is deeply rooted in the human psyche that was used against us, leading to irrational behavior. 2. Social contagion. The phenomenon spread as more people, influenced by a tense atmosphere, began seeing evidence of witchcraft in everyday misfortunes. 3. Authority influence. Influential figures in the community, such as ministers and judges, played crucial roles in perpetuating the fear of witches. 4. Isolation and conformity pressure. Another deep fear humans have is isolation. Historically speaking, getting cut off from the tribe usually equals to certain death. Therefore, conformity becomes a vital survival strategy. So what the hell does this have to do with modern mass psychosis? What even is mass psychosis? And is this really an epidemic? What causes this and how can this be treated? Can it be treated? What is mass psychosis? My boy Carl Jung once said, "It is not famine, not earthquakes, not microbes, not cancer, but man himself who is man's greatest danger to man. For the simple reason that there is no adequate protection against psychic epidemics, which are infinitely more devastating than the worst of natural catastrophes." Just like the Salem witch trials, there are too many examples in human history that illustrates mass psychosis, where misinformation fueled by hysteria can lead drones of people into irrational behavior. A few examples would be Nazi Germany, Y2K, War of the Worlds radio broadcast, Coney 2012, Blue Whale Challenge, and a recent pandemic I forgot the name of. Psychosis is a mental phenomenon. On an individual level, at least medically speaking, psychosis is basically when someone loses touch with reality and descends into irrational behavior.
Again!
This can lead into disorders such as schizophrenia, bipolar, and addiction. There's one thing when an individual descends into madness.
Well, sure, buddy. I'd be happy to help out. What can I do? Doodly doo, diddly doodly diddly doodly, hobbly hoobly hobbly diddly hobbly gobble 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 gabba gabba.
But when an entire society does, like Jung has stated, can cause the most devastating catastrophes. Nazi Germany being a potent example. Remember that there were humans too, with the same psychic structure and vulnerabilities as you and I. Mass psychosis is not a clinical term, but other ways of phrasing it are mass hysteria, which is overreacting on a mass scale, collective delusion, when masses of people strongly believe something that isn't aligned with reality, logic, or reason, and mob mentality. And you tell me if this describes our current situation. And if so, comment some examples below. We are constantly seeking validation from others. We are quick to judge and slow to forgive. We have a hard time distinguishing reality from fiction. We are plagued by anxiety and depression, therefore emotionally vulnerable. We often feel lost and alone in the world. Do you believe that this is ramping up in society? Is this an epidemic? I want you to imagine waking up tomorrow in a world where everyone believes that the stars in the sky are not massive celestial bodies, but rather tiny spots painted on a giant dome that covers the earth. Everywhere you turn, people discuss this as an absolute truth, despite all the scientific evidence to the contrary. From social media influencers to news broadcasters, the consensus is overwhelming. The sky, my friends, is indeed a dome. You notice that schools begin to teach this as part of the curriculum. Books are rewritten to align with this belief, and anyone questioning it is marginalized or ridiculed. Mate, get a load of this bloody twat. So let me get this straight, mate. You believe the stars are massive celestial bodies, bigger than our planet, held together by gravity, light years away? Pfft, mate, you really are insane. Over time, questioning this widely accepted truth becomes not just socially unacceptable, but a basis for massive distrust and conspiracy theories. So in order to not get shunned from society, you kind of have to go along with the collective madness just out of fear. Losing your job, losing your family. This scenario, while fictional, isn't too far off to how mass delusion can spread quickly within societies. And just like a contagious disease, these delusions start off in small pockets. Perhaps with a charismatic leader or a compelling story that taps into the fears or hopes of the people. As the idea spreads, it gains momentum, amplified by media until it infects the majority, behaving much like a psychic epidemic. This is how mass delusion can take hold, sweeping through populations, making people accept and defend wildly irrational beliefs. So is mass delusion really an epidemic today? Well, in the past, let's call them reality-challenged people, could only spread delusion so fast. But now, in a hyper-connected world, the virus of misinformation and delusion spreads faster than ever through clicks, shares, and likes. And think about it, not everyone is a critical thinking person who bases their reality on logic, reason, and empirical evidence, and the willingness to push aside their ego to change their beliefs. This is why reality will always be debated. But what we can say without a doubt is that mental problems like depression, anxiety, and loneliness is ramping up and arguably becoming weaponized. This, plus our constant need for attention and validation, is unfortunately leading us down a dangerous path. Now, the most important question of all, can this actually be treated? I want to share a story first. In the movie Fight Club, the unnamed narrator struggles with insomnia and dissatisfaction with his life. He basically lives a lie, being stuck in an unfulfilling rat race while numbing his pain with material things. Unconsciously, he creates an alter ego, Tyler Durden, who represents everything he wishes he could be. Charismatic, free-spirited, and rebellious. Now, spoiler alert, Tyler Durden is essentially the narrator's shadow self, embodying his repressed desires and aggressions. As he fails to integrate these aspects of his personality by disassociating himself from himself, Tyler's influence grows, leading to the formation of Fight Club and its evolution into the anarchistic Project Mayhem, filled with violence and destruction. The narrator's inability to control or reconcile with his darker self ultimately spirals into a chaotic shit show, destroying lives around him and culminating in his realization of the need to eliminate Tyler. There's a reason why people idolize characters like Tyler Durden, or even arguably you could say characters like Andrew Tate. They represent our shadow self that we repress. When we don't acknowledge and, more importantly, integrate our darker personality traits, we end up worshipping all the wrong people who prey on our vulnerabilities. There's no wonder charismatic leaders are so successful at appealing to our darker natures, and they know this. You gotta look within yourself, because whether you idolize Tyler as the ideal role model, or you absolutely revile him as this villain, both perspectives reflect an unacknowledged shadow. This is why polarized content do so well in the media, and why if you're truly balanced, no one's gonna really listen to you because it's boring. It doesn't actually trigger anything. This is why naive boys like myself in the past used to idolize Brad Pitt's representation of Tyler Durden. And I can talk about all the positive traits like his charisma and his decisiveness and the way he's a straight talker. He doesn't beat around the bush. A lot of these traits are actually quite admirable. But if we're gonna be real here, the reason why I overly idolize characters like Tyler Durden as a younger boy was because I myself was disempowered. I was insecure about my own masculinity. So I projected this kind of golden shadow onto a fictional character, even though this character represents a lot of real life characters. I was pissed off at the system. There are justifiable reasons to be pissed off at the system, but it's when that anger doesn't get directed in a healthy manner that it starts to kind of eat you up alive, and it comes out in very nasty ways. Some people are the opposite. They think that Tyler Durden is the perfect example of toxic masculinity, everything that's wrong with men in the world today. But again, if we're going to be real here, this is often due to their own disconnection with the darker aspects of their personality. All the parts of their masculinity they lock up in a box and they shove it under the carpet. This leads them to deny their own unconscious desires for aggression and dominance. Most people can't admit how twisted they may be deep down. That's why we call it the shadow. That's why we repress these things. Because along the line, most likely when you were a little kid, your parents or your teachers or your peer groups or all the above, they shamed you for expressing a certain part of yourself. And then you made a decision like, oh, okay, this isn't acceptable. Okay, that's not me. There's a lot of reasons for this, like the need to survive and not being isolated from the tribe, etc. But we lock these parts of ourselves and then we project it onto other people. And the truth is, the more you reject your shadow, the stronger your emotional reaction is going to be towards people who don't fit your persona. And ironically, the more twisted you become. Why do you think so many spiritual leaders who put on this enlightened, nice personality on that end up being the biggest predators behind the scene? This unwillingness to face your shadow and actually process your emotions properly is a huge factor of our modern mass psychosis. You'll never be able to think your way to good behavior. Humans are incredibly emotional beings. I know that red pill folk will often project emotionality to just women, but men are just as emotional.
Again!
That's just the human condition. This is why things like depression and addiction is such a huge problem for most of the modern world, which is the inability to face our own emotions. That's why we use escapism in all sorts of forms. You can tell a smoker all the reasons in the world why he should quit ciggies, or tell an obese person to stop eating quarter pounders because of X, Y, and Z. But communicating to the left side of the brain rarely works. More information isn't the answer, clearly, because 99% of the population do not think rationally. I know that we like to believe that we're rational beings, but we're emotional as hell, man.
Again!
Even the smartest scientists and doctors in the world, more often than not, do not always behave in a rational manner. This is why appeal to authority, which leads to mob mentality, is so dangerous, because we're all human. And censoring misinformation isn't the answer either. Neither is forcefully telling people what to think. Emotions, first and foremost, is the most powerful way to truly influence people, and the people at the top, they know this. But this is why the further you are away from understanding and processing your own emotions, the easier it is to manipulate you with fear. And why is this? Ultimately, it's because we don't know ourselves. And it's not easy knowing yourself in a world full of distractions and millions of options. But in order to start curing mass psychosis, or at least a good starting point, is to engage in collective emotional processing, encouraging introspection and acceptance to confront fears and traumas. Stop identifying with your mental disorder and victim mentality. Face your shit and stop projecting onto others. Practice mindfulness and empathy. Cultivate authenticity and vulnerability. Create a supportive environment for collective growth. Let people express themselves, even if it offends you. Because now we all put this nice little mask and we're all, yes, politically correct and woke and yes, I'm all about diversity. But then deep down, you could be the most racist piece of shit ever. And you would never know until it's too late.
You are all hereby found guilty of the crime of witchcraft. I sentence you hags to be burned at the stake until you are deemed fit to re-enter society.
Very dangerous repressing your shadow. Are we that fragile that we can't allow stupid opinions to be out there? Are you that insecure about your own world belief that if someone comes along with an opposite viewpoint, each projection. And then this projection leads into like this victim mentality. Then you create a group out of it. And then now you've got this pocket of people who are projecting their own repressed shadows out there into the world. And then that spreads and it's a contagious, man. It really is this psychic virus.
Well, that's 75 witches we've processed. That ought to show God whose side we're on, eh, Pastor?
And then these form into belief systems that aren't actually aligned with reality, but a defense mechanism of escaping ourselves, right?
If they're really witches, why don't they use their powers to escape?
That sounds like witch talk to me, Lisa.
Never mind.
You have a dark side. You have qualities, little corners in your brain that you don't reveal to other people and that carry something from your childhood, in fact. And what happens when you repress this dark energy, this aggressiveness, this ambition, this desire to get something from other people, perhaps to manipulate people, is when you repress it deeply, because you have to appear to be so nice and pleasant with everyone around you. What happens is it comes out in ways that you're not aware of, that you can't control.
And of course, there's always a line, there's always a balance, right? But we've gone so far into just repressing all our shit because we're so insecure about ourselves, because we don't understand how human nature actually works. We don't want to accept the totality of the human psyche, that this leads us into fragmentation. And this spreads across the whole world up into the top of our leaders. And they know this, right? That's why the media and politicians, they use this against you. And then this divides us even more, creating more fragmentation, more chaos, more instability, more violence, more mob mentality, more psychosis.
And here come the pretzels. There was a little fellowship.
Using only censorship and shame doesn't make the monster go away. It only feeds it. Trust me.
Recognize your dark energy. Recognize the shadow that's inside of you. See when it happens. Do not repress it. Do not tamp it down. Do not let it act out in the world freely, but find a way to channel it. So when you take like water or something that has a lot of force behind it, and you channel it in a direction, it actually has more force. So when you take that energy and you concentrate it on something important, it has a lot of power to it.
One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. If you wanted to dive deeper into the human psyche, transforming chaos into clarity, join the Your Mate Tom tribe by liking the video and subscribing to this channel.
Hasta la vista, baby.